Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and I'm speaking today with Mike Rowley, CEO and President of Stillwater Critical Minerals, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker PGE and on the OTCQB under the ticker PGEZF. And Mike, it's always great getting you on the show just to get an update on Stillwater Critical Minerals. And there's been some key news that came out to the marketplace that we were parsing through before this call. And there's a couple different areas of interest that the exploration team has been working on. I want to start off with holes 5 and 6 that you put into what was an electromagnetic anomaly, and the team wanted to follow up on it. I think we're still waiting on assays here, but it kind of proves the point that there's continued layers of mineralization in this Platreef style deposit that you have next to the Stillwater complex in Montana on your property. Walk us through the importance of these holes 5 and 6 continuing to prove out the Platreef thesis.
Oh, sure, I'd be glad to, and I'm glad to be back. Yes, Stillwater West is a rare asset, district scale in size, and the deeper we look, the more we find. It's frankly been a really rewarding and enjoyable journey. The holes you mentioned, 5 and 6, yeah, they tested, all holes this year were drilled just off the west end of the current resource area, and they test an EM anomaly there, electromag anomaly, that actually runs 12 kilometers east to the area, to the other end of the resource zone that you've seen detailed in our materials, and that speaks to the size we see here. The core picture we ran from hole 6 shows about 7 meters of really good-looking sulfide mineralization, chalcopyrite, pentlandite, some pyrrhotite too. Exactly what we like to see. And that's within 24 meters that frankly looks really good. First test into that EM anomaly, continuing to advance that Platreef model that is so correct for where we are situated stratigraphically below that JM Reef deposit producing by our neighbor Sibanye just to the north of us. This is the correct setting for Ivanhoe's Platreef mine, Anglo American's Mahalaquena mine, and that's what we're pursuing here when we say Platreef. These are large, bulk mineable, highly profitable nickel copper sulfide deposits with PGEs and gold.
Well, just a quick clarification on that for people listening in that may not be familiar with these types of deposits. As you indicated, both Anglo American and Ivanhoe have similar style deposits in South Africa, but this is in Montana next to Sibanye, as you say. But it's also a situation where, as you look at these types of deposits, it's a little different than what they're mining next door. So just explain the difference in what they're mining and how your deposit is a little bit at a different altitude in the deposit structure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is all layered magmatic system. So it was all put down 2.7 billion years ago. Their deposit is what's known as a reef. So it's narrow, high grade, takes a very manual underground mining method, happens to be the highest grade palladium platinum deposit in the world. Even with 100 million ounces, it's still open for expansion. It's a thing of beauty. They run 3 mines, 2 mills, and 1 smelter from that deposit right next door to us. That is equivalent to the Merensky Reef, the mighty Merensky Reef of the Bushveld, South Africa. Stratigraphically below the Merensky is the location you find Ivanhoe's Platreef mine and Anglo American's Mahalaquena. Funny thing about the story here and about us being the right people in the right place at the right time, the JM Reef in Montana was discovered by direct application of those parallels from South Africa. Merensky was found in the 1920s. JM Reef in Montana was discovered in the 1970s when America needed platinum and palladium for catalytic converters. Guess what? Critical minerals in the 1970s. The U.S. has been turning to this district for over 100 years, actually, for critical minerals. The Bushveld proceeded with the discovery and development of the giant mines on the Platreef. Somehow that didn't continue. The parallels were dropped in Montana. And we were in the right place in 2017 to work with a local who had some claims and a lot of data there to start to bring this Platreef model to Montana. So that's basically what we've been doing for 6 years now. Last year, of course, we brought in the former chief geologist from Ivanhoe, who literally built that Platreef mine for them. 8 billion pounds of nickel and copper, 95 million ounces of PGEs, over the past 20 years. And we brought him to Montana, and this is his first drill campaign with us following their work modeling it last year. Exciting stuff.
Well, there's another layer of excitement here, Mike, in this news release, and it really deals with these end zones. You have this N1, N2, and N3 mineralized zones, and they appear to be cross-cutting structures. So a little different than just the Platreef model here, in that you have these other structures now. You put out some impressive grades and width here, 13.2 meters, grading 2.89% recovered nickel equivalent. That's made up of nickel, copper, and cobalt. But what does this mean to the overall mineralized picture here, these end zones that you're highlighting in this press release?
Well, it's the addition of a new mineralized style, and it's really timely because, of course, the market, especially the retail market, which is almost non-existent right now, as you know, is really embracing grade. And these cross-cutting structures appear to bring grade. You mentioned that N1 hit. We didn't know that was N1 when we encountered it. And in fact, we're tying in a hole from the previous year, 8.5 meters of similar grade. Those two, plus some of the things we hit this year, we've been able to figure out that these are now these north-south trending structures. And we've termed those two N1. We've since hit N2 and N3, as you see in this news release, and the first 4 holes are that. And we look forward to updating those figures as we get the assay results in here. Since this news release went out, we've also identified N4 and N5. I've not drilled those yet, but the key point is that these are in addition to that Platreef model, which basically trends east to west in terms of the layering of the complex. This is adding that cross-cutting structure north and south, all laid down at the same time about 2.7 billion years ago, all part of the Stillwater complex. Probably a late-stage pulse coming up along a pre-existing structure in the system. That's the current thinking.
Well, let's add even one more layer to this deposit, Mike. If that wasn't enough, there is also this deeper, what almost seems to make it could be a feeder structure underneath the Chrome Mountain deposit. And this could have some deep roots to it. I guess it ties into different stages of magmatic pulses, but how does that tie into the bigger picture thought process the team's reviewing at present?
It's real. We've recognized that deep feeder structure that you're talking about, reaching down, as far as we can see, 7 kilometers below Chrome Mountain in particular. And it's always been corroborated by the fact that we see disruption of the magmatic layering at Chrome Mountain. So this fits with that late pulse feeder concept. And now we're seeing these end structures, these parallel cross-cutting features above that what looks like a feeder route. So we're excited. It's an exciting development, and there's certainly room to expand that in subsequent programs.
Well, Mike, before we move away from this particular project at Stillwater West, what's the main takeaway you want investors to have as we look forward? There's a coming resource update, I'm sure, after all this drilling. What kind of drilling will it get in the years to come? What's the overall strategy here at Stillwater West with all the different drilling the team's doing?
Everything we've seen, it's all guns blazing at Stillwater. Again, the more we dig, the more we find. It's very rare to have a full district like this that's world-class in the U.S. beside producing mines. That's precisely why Glencore invested in us earlier this year. And we now see, with the resource estimate earlier this year, we now see significant size. You'll start to see us wrap a PEA story around this in parallel to the expansion effort, which will accelerate over the coming years. We're excited. I guess the key point is that we have both grade and scale, which is very unusual. This is not a large homogeneous system. We have good optionality on mine method. We're seeing good nickel tenors at the sulfides. We have that polymetallic basket that brings other values. And then we've got Sibanye right next door, running 3 mines, 2 mills, and 1 smelter. It's a really good setup, especially as the U.S. looks to secure the domestic supply chain of these battery metals.
Well, let's talk about that really quickly, because there's a lot of comments out there about nickel projects in general, be they in Canada, the US, even elsewhere in Australia, where there's different governments in the world and different companies looking to partner with nickel companies, and some of them provide funding. Now, I guess the idea is that a lot of companies believe you have to have a feasibility stage project or be near production to get any of this attention, but in your experience in looking at the nickel market, there's been a couple other success stories in the U.S. Is the government interested in looking at projects like Stillwater West that are maybe more in the exploration to development stage?
Absolutely. We've met with them now at length, and they're quite frustrated with the mining business because you can't simply turn it on. They recognize that. As you've seen, they are now funding the exploration for nickel resources in the US, and that's a key distinction. We haven't seen this since the 1920s in the case of nickel. It's real, and they want to build a domestic supply chain for nickel and other commodities listed, and it simply doesn't exist. There's literally one small nickel mine in the US right now, and it's set to close in a couple of years due to depletion. There is no nickel smelter at all in the US, and the Canadian smelters are overtasked. You're looking at a global supply chain, and the US is focused, a stated objective, and they're writing checks to subsidize that domestic supply chain. Very interesting time, and I expect you'll hear more from us in that regard.
Well, one other area we should touch upon is that this is not a one-trick pony company. You've got a lot of other projects, Mike, and some of these you've been working on even longer than Stillwater. There's what we consider non-core assets, but they're still very core assets in general. And a couple of them, just to mention, Heritage Mining is working on earning into the Black Lake Drayton project. That's adjacent to the Goliath and Goldlum project that Treasury Metals holds. You've got Kluane, which is a polymetallic project, but a lot of critical minerals in there up in the Yukon. And you also have some projects like the Yankee Dundee project and some other projects in Alaska. So what can you tell us as we round out the year and move into next year about all these other non-core assets? What do you want people watching out for in the year to come from these projects?
Sure. Well, we've been at this for a while, right? And we hold out for the right deal structure. So as a result, we have 100% interest in some really good assets. The critical minerals projects are gaining a lot of interest now. The Kluane project, I was just up in the Whitehorse for that show for a week, and I think you'll see some interesting developments there in the coming months. The Duke Island project you mentioned in Alaska is one that we really don't talk about publicly, but we're getting good interest there as well. Nickel, copper, PGE, also potential for CO2 sequestration and hydrogen production. And all these things are suddenly interesting. You mentioned Black Lake Drayton. That's the kind of model that we see broadly in terms of getting value for these non-core assets. That's a gold position that we were putting together starting in 2012. We own 100% of it, even now. Heritage can earn up to 90% of it by completing $5 million in work over 4 years, issuing us a lot of shares in cash. And we get a bonus structure based on ounces of gold that they prove up. That's a real win-win relationship that gives us good exposure to the gold space, and it gives them a great gold asset. Very hard to find a district scale position like that. It was the right time for us to play that card. Yankee Dundee is a bit more obscure, but that was our listing asset in 2007. And if you notice in our financial statements, we've maintained a back-in right on that project and based on the performance of the buyers of that asset. So that's there and that's real, and we will be looking at options for that in the coming months.
So you got 4 other projects besides your main core project that all have the potential to bring further value to the company. But I guess most people are going to see the main value driver as what's happening at Stillwater West. Any final thoughts you want to leave investors with? Any other catalysts you want people to look forward to in the year to come?
Stillwater is driving everything here. That was Glencore's primary interest, and that is our focus from everything we've seen. So drill results from Stillwater are number one in the near term. Look for an expanded resource estimate based on those results in the new year, plus the government initiatives that we mentioned and grander plans for 2024. And then the non-core asset stuff. Watch for updates from Heritage Mining. They're drilling now in Ontario, and they've got results pending. And then we did a program at Kluane this year and staked a few claims. So I would watch for news on that one as well, plus other initiatives we're working on more broadly in non-core assets.
Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up there, Mike. A lot going on with the company, a lot of news flow to come in the year to come. Appreciate this update today. And if people like following along with the news at Stillwater Critical Minerals, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you over to the company website to the news section so you can follow along as well. And until next time, Mike, looking forward to our next conversation.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Chad.